We can go now to Sandra Navidi, CEO of the New York-based advisory firm Beyond Global. Welcome to DW, Sandra. Great to have you with us. Can you help us understand why the German stock market is surging while the country is stuck in an economic crisis and there's an election coming up shortly?
Yes, that number may convey a slightly skewed picture because the majority basically the DAX is dominated by a handful of multinationals that are very big and that generate the majority of their profits in foreign countries, abroad, internationally, and also in sectors that typically show a strong performance.
OK, so they're generating the bulk of their revenue outside of Germany. So do any of these gains show up in any ways, that impact ordinary Germans?
Well, to a lesser extent, because German individuals are only invested to a small extent in the DAX, far less than 20% are invested, and the majority of investors are actually institutional investors like banks, shadow banks, pension funds, and many of them come from abroad. Many of them, actually the biggest one from the United States, notably BlackRock.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about the German investing mentality for a moment, because it's quite interesting. So you're saying that it's not that common for your average German to invest in the DAX. Why don't they invest in the same way that Americans do, for example?
Germans by mentality are more risk averse, and also there's a strong safety net. So they, to a much larger extent, rely on the government when it comes to unemployment, pensions, education, and they have a strong savings culture, and so they're just risk averse.
And so that leaves most Germans out of today's big gains then?
Yes, well, indirectly, they may profit in the sense that they may be invested in investment funds or pension funds who in turn invest their money. So indirectly, they are participating, but retail investors are far and few between generally in Germany, even though there have been efforts to educate the public more and get them more involved in the markets, because generally it's a good thing if the population participates in capital markets.
Mm-hmm. Would you say that the German stock market represents Germany, or is it merely based here?
Well, due to the fact that it is dominated by these large companies like SAP, Deutsche Telekom, Allianz, Siemens Energy, they have a lot of business abroad. For instance, Deutsche Telekom is invested in the US through its subsidiary T-Mobile, which has been very profitable. So they generate their profits abroad. That also means they create jobs abroad and they pay taxes abroad. So generally speaking, it would be better if they were more present in Germany. But the German economy sees some structural challenges, such as high cost of energy, bureaucracy, and just generally not the business-friendly climate, not like the US. And so a lot of businesses go abroad and a lot of capital gets invested abroad.
I'm just going to ask you to look into your crystal ball for a moment. Do you think that this record DAX run will continue?
Well, I think due to what we're seeing currently is absolute uncertainty, especially with regard to geopolitical risk, the war in Ukraine, the political situation in the US, with regard to tariffs, and things that President Trump has said. There's great headline risk out there, and especially institutional investors are very good in calculating risk, but uncertainty you cannot calculate. And that's also why oftentimes in the past we've seen when we had great geopolitical risks, investors would just sit on their hands because they said, there's no way we can calculate this risk. And currently we're seeing so many risks that may exacerbate each other, and so it's even harder to predict. So I think that investors generally have an optimism bias. They participate in the market. They want it to perform well. It's a kind of cognitive bias. And there's herd behavior. There's a fear of missing out. But that can go on the way up, but that can also fuel movements on the way down. So I think because of the uncertainty, we'll probably in the coming months see great volatility.
Sandra Navidi from Beyond Global in New York. Sandra, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.